The New York Jets fall to 2-9 on the season after their 23-10 loss to the Baltimore Ravens. We break it all down on the other side. Let's get into it.
You want to be a winner. Not only have to understand how to win, but to understand how to consistently win.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome into another episode of the Believe in Jets podcast. I am your host, DTereman. The New York Jets do drop to 2-9 on the season. 23-10 is the final score out of Baltimore in a game that is basically the tale of two halves for really Baltimore and New York. Starting off the game with the ball, the Ravens win the toss. They defer to the second half. Jets start the ball with Tyrod Taylor under center. They go 3 and out. Tyrod Taylor has his second down pass almost intercepted. The Ravens get the ball, and we know that they're a big 12 personnel team with two tight ends. So I wanted to see how the New York Jets were going to match against that 12 personnel. And they came out running three linebackers with Kiko Mawinoa joining the second level with Jamie Sherwood and Quincy Williams. The Jets stopped the Ravens on a cheeky tight end sneak with Mark Andrews that they sniff out on 3rd and 1. The Ravens look like they're going to punt. They call a timeout. They end up going for it, and they run a tush push with Mark Andrews and pick up the first down. 3 plays later, Lamar Jackson throws an incomplete over the middle. This time, the Jets match the Ravens' 12 personnel with nickel defense with an extra DB instead of a third linebacker. They play zone coverage. They get off the field on an incomplete pass. Still scoreless after one possession each. The Jets get the ball back. They start their drive on an end around to Arian Smith, which was, a very good drive starting play, getting the East and West run game going for New York. John Mechie with a solid block on the perimeter on that play. A couple runs later by Breece Hall, you have a great 17-yard pass from Tyrod Taylor to A.D. Mitchell on a dig route, on a dagger concept where they have the clear out with the dig underneath it. One of their favorite concepts to run this year. Great protection by the offensive line, a huge 3rd and 6 pickup. They keep the chains moving. They run 3 straight run plays to Isaiah Davis, which sets up a 4th and 5. They come out looking like they're going to go for it. They take a delay of game. I don't think they were actually going to go for it. Wish they were a little bit closer to maybe give them the option to go for it, but they didn't want to kick a 60-yard field goal, so they took a 5-yard penalty and punted. Austin McNamara down to inside the 10-yard line at the 6. So a good job by special teams there. Jets defense gets off the field again. Lamar scrambles on 3rd down and 3. Again, 12 personnel versus nickel coverage. And Isaiah Likely is the target this time. And A.Z. Thomas does a great job in zone coverage, latching on to Isaiah Likely and forcing the incomplete on a Lamar scramble. So the Ravens punt it back to the Jets, still scoreless. And we're basically scoreless through the first quarter and a half of this game. The Jets get another possession. They don't do much with it. 3rd down passes batted down. Had a couple busted plays in there, including a couple failed Breece Hall runs. Ravens get the ball back, and Juwan Briggs gets them off the field on a big-time sack. He uses his strength against the left guard Voorhees. The Jets were running man coverage on a mesh concept where they just had crossers with somebody sitting in the middle. They cover it up really well. Briggs gets home for a sack. Jordan Stout might be the best punter in the NFL. Austin McNamara is unfortunately second for the Jets because he boomed a 74-yard punt after that Briggs sack. Starts the Jets off at their own 21-yard line. They go on to have their best drive of the game. 12 plays, 79 yards, just over 6 minutes time of possession. and they punch it in for a touchdown on a great concept where they had two receivers to the left side, a clear out with Mechie running a speed out, or like a sort of like a whip route where he faked to the inside and moved out. Had great separation against the off coverage. Tyrod throws it on time. Easy touchdown for the Jets. Do want to highlight a couple big plays from Breece Hall on this drive specifically. He had a really good pass protection blitz pickup on the second play of the drive where Tyrod was able to get the ball to John Mechie on a 19-yard catch and run on a slant. So that was a great pickup by Breece Hall on the blitz. And then Breece Hall had a 15-yard check down that he took. And at the end of the play, he had a big hit collision with Kyle Hamilton, the safety of the Baltimore Ravens, and he ended up actually getting hurt, one of his two injuries in that game for Hamilton. So Breece Hall was really doing everything early and often for this Jets offense. But Mechie turns it in for 6. The Jets go up 7-0, and they open the scoring, which if you told me earlier on in the week that the Jets were going to open the scoring 7-0 in the middle of the second quarter against the Baltimore Ravens, I would have told you that you're lying, or that the worst outcomes possible would have happened for the Ravens. And that's not the case. They might not have been playing their best brand of football in the first half, but the Jets were game planning well against them. They were stopping them for the most part, and they punch it in. They start the scoring 7-0. Ensuing possession, the Ravens take it down relatively quickly on a couple explosive plays to Zay Flowers. They had a 20-yard pass to Zay Flowers that had holding on Kiko Malinois that was declined. They had a near sack by JJ and Jawan Briggs on Lamar Jackson, but the next play was a screen to Flowers where AZ Thomas had a pretty bad, downhill whiff on a tackle, and that allowed him to spring for 14 yards. So 2 pretty big plays by Zay Flowers on that drive, and the Ravens answer very quickly with a field goal, so it's 7-3. The Jets get the ball back, and they have a minute and a half left, 1 timeout, starting at their 40-yard line. Good crosser to Mechie for 15 yards. Now they're going tempo. Tyrod Taylor misses a pass to A.D. Mitchell that really wasn't even close. They throw a check down to Mason Taylor, and on 3rd and 3, Tyrod Taylor takes a sack that he really couldn't take. I'll have to go back on the all-22 and see if there was coverage on the back end that, stopped him from making a pass, or if he just held on to it a little too long. I'm leaning that he held on to it a little too long because I believe he had the check down to the running back right in front of him. Either way, a sack you can't take. Membu lets up the sack, technically in the stat book, and they have to punt, so it's 7-3. Baltimore basically gives up with 1 timeout in their back pocket going into half with 25 seconds. They had a chance to lap the Jets and try to get points before the half, knowing they get the ball in the 3rd quarter, but they kneel it. And to the displeasure of the Baltimore Ravens fans, they were booing the Ravens 7-3 going into the locker room, losing to the Jets. And it's the first time in quite a while that a game involving the New York Jets had fans booing, not in the direction of the Jets. So a very odd feeling, but a great feeling going into the locker room. The Jets were out gaining the Baltimore Ravens in terms of yards, 150-72. So they had double the yardage of the Ravens. That's the fewest yards that the Ravens have had in any half this season. So the defense certainly came to play. They had 95-49 in the passing game split, 55-23 in the run game split. They were doing a great job bottling up Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, who might not have, his top gear right now because he's dealing with lower leg injuries, but 23 offensive rushing yards for the Ravens in the first half. You've game planned very well. So a good job by Steve Wilks. 3rd downs in the first half, the Jets were 3 of 7. The Ravens were 0 for 5. They did convert the only 4th down that they had an opportunity to convert on the tush push to Mark Andrews, but they were 0 for 5 on 3rd down. They were also 0 for 1 in the red zone, where the Jets capitalized on their lone red zone trip in the first half, and that's how they got their touchdown. The Jets were also out gaining in terms of first downs. They had 10 first downs to the Ravens 4 going into the locker room. At halftime, Tyrod Taylor had 102 passing yards on 13 attempts with the touchdown to Mechie, so he is already far exceeding what Justin Fields' first half outputs have been in the games prior. I believe it was like 23 yards last week. And against Cleveland, I think he even had 15 or 50 at the most passing yards in the first half. So Tyrod Taylor with 102 at the half, Breece with 52 scrimmage yards at the half, which puts him over 1,000 scrimmage yards for the third straight season. A pretty historic feat for the Jets running back and a good accolade for him on his resume. And John Mechie in the first half was 4 for 4, catching all of his targets, 59 yards and a touchdown. On the flip side, this was only the fourth time all season Baltimore didn't score a first half touchdown. And there were games, obviously, where they had Cooper Rush and Snoop Huntley starting games. So again, the Jets defense game planned and came to play in the first half. Lamar Jackson was 6 of 11 for 59 yards, and Derrick Henry was 5 for only 14 yards on the ground. Now, you get into the second half, the Ravens get the ball coming out of the locker room. They throw a comeback route to Zay Flowers that had Brandon Stephens beat, and they were trying Brandon Stephens, former Baltimore Raven, pretty often in the passing game, as well as A.Z. Thomas versus DeAndre Hopkins. But on this play, Zay Flowers had Stephens beat on a comeback. He just dropped it. Then they were hit with a false start penalty. Lamar dirted a screen pass because Jermaine Johnson sniffed it out against the tight end Isaiah Likely. 3rd and 15. They're about to get off the field. Lamar Jackson scrambles. He throws it deep up the right sideline to Isaiah Likely. And of course, this is where Clete Blakeman comes into play, the referee. He throws a DPI on Isaiah Oliver. Yes, it is Isaiah Oliver's fault. I'm not going to, excuse him of blame on the penalty. He did not turn his head around, and he was hand fighting with Isaiah Likely downfield. I think it was still a little bit of a ticky-tack penalty. However, nonetheless, 34 yards, spot foul, automatic first down. The Jets do not get off the field when they were about to, pretty much try to gain all the momentum back after stopping the Ravens on 3 straight plays coming out of the half. Now, Derrick Henry gets going a little bit. They run 2 runs to him. DeAndre Hopkins beats Jarvis Brownlee for a first down pass. They run a reverse to Zay Flowers that gets him into the red zone. A couple more runs by Derrick Henry and Keaton Mitchell. They end up having a weird situation on 3rd and goal where the Ravens made an offensive substitution and the Jets were, countering that substitution of their own. And I'm not sure if the Jets were too slow getting their substitution on the field, but there was no referee standing in front of the quarterback and the center stopping the snap from happening, which is usually protocol when the offense makes a substitution. The defense is allowed to, make their substitution as well, and they have to be able to get set on the field. For some reason on this 3rd and goal, that was not the case, and they had a defensive lineman running onto the field who was barely able to get set. Lamar Jackson hands it off up the middle to Derrick Henry, and the Jets lose the lead. It is now 7-10 Baltimore. Ensuing possession for the Jets, they have a quick out to Mason Taylor, a Breece Hall run to the left for 2 yards, and they're immediately facing a 3rd and 4 situation. Now, this is where I'll get on the coaching staff, not necessarily for the decision to go for the play call that they did on 3rd and 4, and then the subsequent 4th and 2 afterward. But if it's 3rd and 2 and Breece Hall just had a 2-yard run and he didn't touch the ball on first down, he's not too tired to come off the field. Isaiah Davis in that 3rd and 4 situation, if you think it's 4-down territory, you need to treat that down as if it's almost like 2nd down. And then Breece Hall stays on the field. You don't get it. That 4th down is treated like a 3rd down, and maybe you can bring Isaiah Davis on in that situation. However, they run a 2-yard run up the middle with Isaiah Davis on 3rd and 4. They get to 4th and 2. Okay, maybe on their 4th and 2 play call, they'll bring Breece back on the field and run a play that they practice during the week with Breece Hall and not Isaiah Davis on the field. Again, they don't do that. So I agreed with the decision-making process to go for a 3rd and 4 run and a 4th and 2 attempt to go for the first down on fourth down instead of punting it near midfield or just past midfield. I forget the exact yard line. But not having Breece Hall on the field during those situations is so killer when Breece Hall is like the generator of most of your explosive plays in your offense. So not the best sequence for Tanner Engstrand in terms of getting his personnel situated, but I do understand the decision-making process to go for it. But that 4th and 2, Tyrod Taylor hesitates. Mechie, his intended receiver, is completely blanketed by Nate Wiggins on the boundary. He tries to throw the hitch route anyway. It's short. It doesn't even make it. It's not even close to Mechie. And the Jets turn the ball over near midfield, down 7-10. Now, the defense, knowing that they could have got off the field last drive, a penalty turns into a touchdown. They have a chance for redemption. It's 7-10. It's still a one-possession game. Immediately coming out of the turnover on downs, a play-action check down for Derrick Henry that he runs for an extra 15 yards for a total of 20 yards on the play. They had a delayed blitz 2 plays later where Jamien Sherwood could have got home on Lamar Jackson, but he escapes it and throws it away to create a 3rd and 7 instead of about a 3rd and 16. It was a difference of about 7 or 8 yards on the sack as opposed to the throwaway. On 3rd and 7, they throw a deep pass to Zay Flowers, and this time the culprit in the secondary is Tony Adams. He picks up his defensive pass interference penalty, 19 yards, automatic first down. It sets the Ravens up for 1st and goal inside the 10. Jarvis Brownlee gets 2 really good, really impressive run stuffs against Derrick Henry. And then on 3rd and goal, the pass is batted incomplete to Mark Andrews. It looks like a bit of a drop, but also Tony Adams late getting his hands there. Either way, the Ravens decide to go for it on 4th and goal, which shows you how much, faith they have in their offense versus the defense, the way it was playing, that drive and the drive prior where they ended up allowing a touchdown after the penalty. So in similar fashion, the penalty leads to a walk-in Derrick Henry touchdown. 17-7 is the score at that point. The Jets get a little bit lucky on the ensuing kickoff, illegal kickoff. The ball doesn't reach the landing zone, which is one of their new quirky rules for the kickoff. It didn't reach, I believe, the 20-yard line. So the Jets start with it on their own 40, so great field position. They get to a 3rd and 7. Tyrod Taylor steps up and evades the rush, puts a really good stiff arm on Trenton Simpson, picks up 8 yards and a first down scrambling to his right. Breece Hall, couple runs, and then they throw a check down to Mason Taylor after a holding penalty, sets up 1st and long. Tyrod Taylor again evades another sack, and this time he is improvising and he's pointing towards A.D. Mitchell downfield to come back to the ball. He rifles in a really I don't want to say tight window throw, but a throw that's a really low percentage throw, scrambling to his left as a right-handed thrower, trying to get his guy to come back, throws it in there to A.D. Mitchell for his 2nd catch of the day for 26 yards. Tyrod Taylor then scrambles for 0 yards, throws it away to set up a 3rd and 10. He takes a big shot on a pressure. They send, I believe, 6 men in a pressure on 3rd and 10. He misses. Mason Taylor over the middle, which would have been a first down if it was thrown accurately. He had a slight bit of separation at the top of his in-breaking route against the defender he was going up against. But facing the pressure, Tyrod Taylor had to make a quick, inaccurate throw. Takes a pretty big hit. I thought he was hurt, but he seemed to be okay. The Jets settle for a field goal. It is now 17-10. So 1-score game going into the 4th quarter here. Ravens get the ball, first possession of their own in the 4th quarter. They come out in 21 personnel. The Jets match it with their 3 linebacker look. Harrison Phillips has a great run stuff on Derrick Henry. They then go to 12 personnel with their 2 tight end package, and they hit Zay Flowers on a dig route against zone coverage for 16 yards and a first down. They hit a huge play action comeback to Devontae Walker against Brandon Stevens. Again, picking on him with the explosives. They end up having a hitch route to Mark Andrews that sets up another first down. but then a good tackle for loss on a screenplay by Brandon Stevens. He was playing super aggressively at the line of scrimmage. He continues being one of the more physical defensive backs on this team. Him and Jarvis Brownlee are just a different level of physicality that DJ Reed kind of had for the Jets in years past, but just not the same in terms of, body size and play style. Jarvis Brownlee and Brandon Stevens do a great job of working downhill and blowing up blocks to get in on the run game as well. So they sniff out a screen pass for a tackle for loss by Brandon Stevens and Tony Adams. Lamar scrambles up the middle, and Quincy makes a great open field tackle, which probably stopped an explosive play. Then on a 3rd and 8, they have a double mug look by the Jets. They walk everybody up to the line of scrimmage, which kind of gives you the indicator of one-on-one on the boundary, which it was. DeAndre Hopkins beats AZ Thomas with a double move, but Lamar Jackson couldn't find him, overthrows him in the end zone. The Ravens settle for a 35-yard field goal to go up 10. It is now 20-10. The Jets ensuing possession, one of my, most intriguing possessions of the game, in my opinion, outside of the John Mechie touchdown drive. They come out in 21 personnel with Andrew Beck, in I formation. They run a play action check down to him for a first down. The next play, they run a check down off play action to Breece Hall in the flat to the left. And as soon as he catches it, he turns upfield and has to spin to avoid the open field tackler. Turns that into a catch and run of 40 yards. John Mechie, Jeremy Ruckert, and I believe Mason Taylor all had key blocks downfield on the play as well. So a 40-yard explosive for Breece Hall. They're in the red zone now. Again, only 20-10 with plenty of time left in the fourth quarter. They get an illegal shift penalty and a holding penalty on the same play. They just couldn't get lined up fast enough. I believe it was Armand Membu who wasn't set up. Sets up a 1st and 20 now at the 27-yard line, so backed out of the red zone. A screen pass to Breece Hall with incredible blocks by Joe Tippmann and Myers, coming off the holding penalty. Tippmann must have been super, mad because he took his aggression out on the defender in the open field on the screen pass. Breece Hall gets them back into the red zone. The next play, they hand it off to Breece. He runs right. Marlon Humphrey, while Breece is getting tackled by a handful of Ravens defenders, he pries the ball loose, and Alohi Gilman, the safety for the Ravens, falls on it inside the 5-yard line. So the Jets come away with 0 points, 20-10 on a very promising drive, which could have made it a one-score game. They were obviously in field goal range, but they had 1st and goal. And they were ready to, or 2nd and goal, and they were ready to punch it in for a touchdown to make it 20-17. So a gut punch there for the Jets. They were able to stop the Ravens, who started at their own 3-yard line. They did get a big run from Derrick Henry on the play. They did have a 35-yard run by Keaton Mitchell called back by a holding penalty on Tyler Linderbaum. Set up a 2nd and 17 where they basically just gave up in terms of trying to advance the ball. They had a small run to Derrick Henry and then a check down to Isaiah Likely, which set up a punt. The Jets, however, did not call a timeout after that play. There was about 3.5 minutes left. They let the clock go all the way down to about 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Preserve all 3 of their timeouts. However, Jordan Stout boots a 67-yard punt that bounces and rolls out of bounds, at the 5-yard line. So 20-10, the Jets have just under 3 minutes left, all 3 of their timeouts, but they're at the 5-yard line. Tyrod Taylor scrambles for a yard, then hits Alan Lazard for a 9-yard first down on a shallow crosser. He misses A.D. Mitchell deep on a one-on-one deep pass down the right sideline. A check down to Mechie. 3rd and 6. Tyrod Taylor holds on to the ball forever, takes an 8-yard sack. 4th and 14. They go deep, incompletion, turnover on downs regardless. The Ravens, with enough time to try to score, are doing just that. They try to score up 10 points with the ball under a minute and a half, I believe, left in the game. And they go for a touchdown. They end up having to settle for a field goal after a false start on 4th down. So it's 23-10 And honestly, the only reasons I can think that they did that is because their offense has been struggling mightily as of late, even with Lamar back in the lineup. They weren't happy with their offensive performance, and they wanted to end on a touchdown drive. Some will probably make the conspiracy case that they wanted to make it so that they covered the spread of 13.5 points because they ended up winning by 13 points. So they went for the field goal 23-10. Jets get the ball back with half a minute left, and Tyrod Taylor takes a sack and then goes deep to A.D. Mitchell, which ends up getting intercepted. So 23-10 is your final score. A much more competitive game than I thought, especially in the first half. Again, 7-3 in the first half going into the locker room is great. You have the two egregious defensive penalties by Isaiah Oliver and Tony Adams, guys who, if you want to look for a silver lining, those are guys who are likely or most likely going to get replaced in the secondary moving into 2026. There's a very low percent chance that those guys are playing meaningful snaps, assuming that the Jets use their free agency dollars and draft picks all across the board, right? Safety is a huge position of need. So that would be my only silver lining, is that those guys aren't going to be playing meaningful snaps to be in those situations in the years to come. But defensive penalties like that in a game that you are hanging around in against a superior opponent who isn't putting the nail in your coffin just yet, those are absolute game killers. So the two defensive pass interference penalties that immediately set up Ravens touchdowns coming out of the half, and then the Breece Hall, the fumble inside the 10-yard line, that's always going to be a tough one. That's his second penalty, or second fumble lost, both inside the red zone this year. I get it. He had a ridiculous drive leading up to that fumble, so you can, slightly excuse it. You're in the middle of tweeting out, pay Breece Hall, and then he fumbles inside the 10. So it's just a really unfortunate look for him. But those three plays, the defensive pass interferences and the fumbles, really made the game that much harder for the Jets in a game where you can't afford to have those backbreaking, mistakes. The Jets once again did not take away the football, so they're at 11 straight games without an interception. They only have one takeaway on the entire season in London against the Denver Broncos. So on U.S. soil, they have 0 takeaways on the season, which is just a really bad look for Steve Wilks' unit. We'll get much more in depth in this during the week, so subscribe to the channel at DTereman. Like and rate and review this podcast wherever you get it, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio. I appreciate everybody tuning in to another episode of Believe in Jets. DTereman signing out.